I'm finally back. Oh my god. I've been away. I've been studying. That's pretty much it. There's nothing interesting about why I haven't uploaded in a while. I've been at uni. So, remember in like my last 3 to 4 videos, I always started off saying, yeah, I have something else I'm working on, but I decided to do this instead. So I haven't been able to continue the research for the video I was going to do. Today, I originally had something else planned. Well, guess what? That thing that I was working on, that's this. Finally, I finally took all my many pages of notes and wrote all of the stuff out and then rewrote it and then went back and changed things, and it's kind of ready. What I really wanted to talk about today is the zodiac. I'm going to assume that everyone knows astrology, star signs, zodiac, even if it's just knowing of it. Maybe you know your own, maybe you know your attributes, and maybe you know your friends and blah, blah, like, you know what it is, right? So it's obviously huge right now because I don't know if you've been on Instagram lately, but there's just so many meme pages just like around astrology and stuff. If you're anything like me, you kind of see someone share something and then you're like, well, fuck, I gotta find out about mine. I don't want to say there's a resurgence of interest in astrology right now, but like it's huge right now. There's like apps and so many Instagram pages, and you can like look at someone to an extent and know the attributes of a sign and be like, well, that person is a total Pisces, or, you know, it's just huge. But like, despite whether you think astrology is like pseudoscience or like a bad case of like confirmation bias, you can't deny that it's fun. Even if you don't take it seriously, it's fun. Like, why do you hate fun so much? I just think it adds like a sense of whimsy and mysticism, thinking that it's not just, you know, environmental or like hereditary or whatever traits that make you the person you are, but like the planets and the sun and the moon and all that kind of stuff could create your personality to be so unique from anyone else's. And I just like, why would you hate that? I don't know. I just think not everything needs to have an explanation and have scientific reason for it to just be something to believe in. And I'm saying this as a science student. And okay, so you can never entirely prove it's fake, and you can never entirely prove that it's real, because that's the nature of spiritualism, baby. Like, you just don't know, and that's part of the fun. But what you cannot deny is how old it is, like how long ago astrology and the zodiac were utilized, created, had practices built around them. When I say old, I mean old, like 10,000 years old, so old. And I'm not saying that like the zodiac and interest in astrology has suddenly reemerged lately, because when I think back on my life, it's always been present. My mum is big into astrology all my life, getting bought shirts with like my star sign in like bedazzled. I get mugs with my sign's attributes. My mom even had commemorative plates for like everyone in our family. And like, I think honestly, interest in astrology and the zodiac has always been. It's always been a part of culture. Like, you open the newspaper and alongside the crossword puzzles and the Sudoku puzzles, there's usually astrology too. It's always been a thing, but the difference is that it changes and readapts itself and like evolves to suit the culture. So originally when I was researching and writing out for this video, and why it took me so long, is because I wanted to touch on the mythology side, and trust me, there's a lot. But because of the fact that there's so much and you really need to establish like a foundation, I have to first talk about where it started and where it came from and where it went before I can talk about the mythology. So this video is like a precursor to knowing the rest, I guess. So anyways, here we go. Where did astrology come from? So, astrology is essentially looking up at the sky, recognizing constellations, planets, the placement of the moon and the sun, and tracking its movement and tracking stars. And that is astrology. In essence, it is monitoring the sky and the movements of our astral bodies. Looking at stars and the moon and planets and stuff. And this method was first conceived by the ancient Mesopotamians up to 10,000 years ago. There's no solid date. But then, like, expanding on that, so for like basically as long as we had known about the Mesopotamians in modern society, it was agreed upon that they were the first to create like calendars, like intelligent systems of tracking years and days and weeks and blah, 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 blah. Calendars in itself is like kind of a mathematic greatness. It's a good thing. It's like an intelligent thing. It takes a lot of smarts to create an organized calendar. And so we, as modern humans, thought that the Mesopotamians were the first to do that. But then in 2013, they found organized calendars in Mesolithic Scotland that were like 5,000 years older than the Mesopotamian ones. And the thing that fucks me up the most about that is like Mesolithic Scotland was like, this is before the Bronze Age, this is before using metals and stuff. Like, this is like very basic society. And they had calendars. So they had a grasp of mathematics at least. And I don't have a grasp of mathematics. Like, what the fuck, dude? Like, anyways, it's still like agreed upon that the Mesopotamian ones are way more intelligent, had way more detail put into them, including astrology, but not limited to. And before I go any further, it is important that I establish some definitions here because it's important to know the difference. So, first, we have astrology. Astrology, as I said before, encompasses basically the study of the sky, specifically stars, planets, sun, moon. The zodiac is the section of the sky that we can view, and that's what we monitor, these constellations and planets and stars and planets. And did I already say planets? The zodiac is merely the part of the sky that we see and use to apply astrology to. Horoscopes is using the astrology of the zodiac to create a personalized way of predicting things based on, I guess, information gathered from stuff. I can't really go into it. So horoscope is, you were born in this 28-day period, and in this 28-day period, the primary constellation that you could see in the sky was the constellation Aries. So you are an Aries. And then there's like, what is an Aries? Well, an Aries is XYZ, and so you're this kind of person. So that's horoscope. And unfortunately, the ancient Mesopotamians didn't create horoscopes. But an ancient society did create horoscopes. So it's still very old and been around for a very long time. The ancient Chinese in 2 BC created horoscopes. So it's still not new age shit. It's still old as fuck and practiced for like thousands of years. But just remember that we wouldn't have horoscopes if we didn't have astrology, and we wouldn't have astrology if it weren't for the ancient Mesopotamians. So if the ancient Mesopotamians didn't use astrology to create horoscopes and make personalized predictions for themselves, what did they use it for? That's a great question. I'm really glad you asked. To understand this, we have to travel back to ancient Sumer. Sumer is a region of ancient Mesopotamia. It's like the southern part of Iraq. And this is where practicing astrology first originated. So the Sumerians were watching the sky and taking notes and noticing pattern, like the constellations moving and like planets becoming present and then disappearing, and full moon stuff and the half moon and all the other stuff the moon does, and then the sun, and it rises in the east and it sets in the west, and so they were taking note of all of this and writing it down, and there was like 68 to 70 tablets found of their recordings, and in those tablets were like 6,500 to 7,000 different specific predictions. These predictions range from the weather, like a future forecast. So, you know, in the wet season, we predict flooding. In the dry season, we predict drought. But not even that. Like they made predictions of like politics and like when a new king would be born and when people would revolt and all this kind of stuff that predicted like the political climate based on essentially the constellations, the planets, etc., whatever would be present at the time, and their coinciding mythology, because the mythology gave context to what the stars in the sky meant, essentially. So, like, the Sumerians obviously created this practice, then the Babylonians really oomphed it up and essentially gave us the bones of what we have now. They were kind of like, they revolutionized what the Sumerians created and made it better, because that's what the Babylonians did basically all through the history of ancient Mesopotamia. They were the more advanced city, they were the more remembered city, they had the better mythology. That's totally subjective. Anyways, so Babylon is what we now know as like the center of Iraq. What the Babylonians did was they took astrology and they used what the Sumerians had created as a cheat sheet to then make it better, and they created this essentially like this compendium of just everything astrology, and that was called the Mulapin. And I'm sorry if I mispronounce that or I don't emphasize on the right parts of the words. Okay, and so the Mulapin, it contained lots and lots and lots of information. It had like 71 different constellations written about that. It had sun setting and rising and setting times, the moon patterns, and then along with like the stars and the constellations, they also had gods and deities that they had assigned to certain things because of either like the mythology kind of coinciding with what was happening. Everything had mythology attached to it that gave it meaning and what made it easier to predict things. Originally, we were working with like 17 to 18 different primary major constellations, and then that got reduced down to 12, which then got adopted by ancient Egypt and ancient Greece and ancient China and so on and so forth to then give us what we have now, the 12 star signs. And so yeah, the reason they were able to make predictions based on what constellation was present or what planet was present or eclipses and all that kind of stuff was because the mythology closely related to the season, or how do I explain this? The gods that they decided represented this and that was very specific and tied into the calendar. And that sounds really vague, but I am very dumb. But to keep it short and sweet, Mulapin had what is now known as 12 major constellations. They had 5 primary planets, Jupiter, Mercury, Mars, Venus, Saturn, and then the sun and the moon were ruled by the sun and the moon god. And then on top of everything, you had the 2 gods who were like at the top of everything. And that was Anu, who was the god of the sky, and Enlil, who was the god of fate, and like heaps of other stuff. But in this instance, we only care about the fact that he's god of fate, because what is predicting astrology other than predicting fate, whether it be weather or like a king being born, you know? So very, very last is the names of the 12 major astrology constellation signs. So we start at Taurus. Taurus was known as the heavenly bull. So it's, you know, still a bull. Then we've got Gemini, which was known as the twins. Cancer was known as the digger. Leo was the great carnivore or the great lion. Virgo was the daughter of sin or the daughter of seed and furrow. Libra was the scales. Scorpio was the claws. Sagittarius was the pabblesage, which is a mythological creature that had the torso of a man and the bottom part of a scorpion. Where do you recognize that from? But not the centaur. We know that was Greek mythology. Capricorn was the goat fish. Aquarius was the Great One. I'm not making that up, that's true. Pisces was either the swallows or the tails, kind of doing the 69 thing. I don't need to go into it too far, but Pisces was the last constellation that they found as far as like details written about it, and a lot of it's just kind of lost to time. That's the thing with like ancient Mesopotamian stuff, is a lot of it's just like gone forever. But anyways, and the last one was Aries, and Aries was known as the hired man, or just the ram. Like, as I said, the names have significance. There's a lot to speculate about what these names mean, what mythology could be tied to them, what significance as far as climate and weather and forecast and season, because that was pretty much the primary use of astrology back then. Not a lot has changed since twerks and little changes by mainly the Greeks and the Chinese, pretty much mainly the Greeks and Chinese. Maybe a little bit of the Egyptians, but mainly the Greeks and Chinese. So that's your foundation. That's what you need to know more, to understand more. But anyways, that's what I've got for you today. Thanks for watching. I'll have some more videos out hopefully soon before I go silent again when I return back to uni and back to study. And just so you know, my star sign is Aquarius, and so my star sign is the Great One, and I love that. I feel like that's me, the Great One.